Welcome to Carl and Heather Present,
the podcast where we dive into the insights, challenges, and humor of being married to someone who is nothing like you.
Are you ready?
Let's go.
Oh, don't you know it's Carl and Heather Present Marriage Podcast.
Welcome to episode 6 of Carl and Heather Present.
All right.
How's it going, babe?
It's good. It's a beautiful day here.
It is a great day.
Yeah.
And in Middle Tennessee, cool in the mornings, a little bit hot during the afternoons.
Yeah.
I love it.
I love it. I do have some sad news to start with this week.
I know what you're going to say.
I know. We have lost our beloved Mambulance, which is what our boys call our car, the Ford Flex.
Yes.
We knew it was coming. And so we had to get a new to us car this week. Not a new car, but he had too many repairs to actually invest in fixing him. And so instead, we're going to give him to our teenage son.
I know.
Or sell him to our teenage son.
If we were to sell them to a stranger, we would feel super shady about it.
Yeah,
But we're selling
you know.
them to our son, and it's like, hey, it's a be good learning experience for you, buddy.
Yeah. But I will say, I hate car shopping. I just hate it. And I think it also highlights how different we are, because I remember our first car shopping experience as a married couple. Do you remember that?
Yes.
It was not good. It was.
We were on the road
July
one
4th.
summer. It was July 4th. Our van had broken down in Washington, D.C.
Washington, D.C., yeah.
And it was blown motor.
Yeah.
So we had to go get a new one.
Yeah.
And we went into the dealership, and the first salesman you saw, you said, "We are desperate to buy a car. Our car is blown up on the road. We had to take a taxi to get here. We cannot leave here without a car." And I was just like, well, guess we're paying full price.
Yeah.
Our
Yeah.
advantage was lost, but that's okay. We did get a van that day, and it was a good van.
Yeah,
We
it was a
drove the
good
wheels
van.
off of it.
Absolutely. The
And
Lord provided.
I sold it to these boys who were in a Christian band for the price of a Les Paul.
There you go. Well, I blew it and I learned my lesson, right? And now we have a beautiful new to us Honda Odyssey. I love it. We name our vehicle, so we have affectionately named her Caroline after our beloved Carolina Tar Heels.
Go Heels.
Go Heels. Go Heels.
Speaking of Odyssey, I would like to encourage everyone to take an Odyssey over to carlandheather.com.
Man.
Carlandheather.com is where you can learn about this ministry that Heather and I are building. A lot of people ask me these days, hey, what are you doing now?
Yeah.
This is what I'm doing
Yeah.
now. This is what you're doing
Right.
now. And we're doing it together. We want to build a ministry that helps awaken affection for God and each other, making marriages stronger and encouraging people to keep going. So go to carlandheather.com
Yeah.
and check out what's going on.
Yeah. I love that smooth transition from Honda Odyssey to taking an Odyssey over to our website.
I'm very smooth.
Smooth. I know you were. I know you were.
That's what a lot of people say. Let's look at a couple of listener comments.
Okay.
We had someone comment on YouTube. Ontario Guy 4707 says, "I detect a Southern accent."
Do you think he's talking about you or me?
I'm gonna guess you.
Okay.
I mean, he is a detective.
Yeah,
He's a
you're right.
regular Sherlock Holmes. but,
Ontario guy, I received that.
yeah.
You do. You are in fact correct.
I like your accent.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
We had a top 10 rejected podcast names video that a lot of people interacted with. And so it was top 10 rejected names for our podcast, but it was themed from the show The Office.
Our favorite show.
Our very favorite show,
whole
The
world.
Office. If you watch The Office, you'll know. But one of our friends, Jeremy Quarles on Instagram, he said one of the rejected names was Somehow I Marriage. But Jeremy said Somehow I Marriage should not have been rejected. So maybe we'll do it. Maybe we'll do another, like a side podcast, a side project called Somehow I Marriage.
Jeremy, we appreciate that. We receive that.
I can be Michael and you can be Jan.
I don't want to be Jan. I want to be Pam.
Wow.
Okay. Anyway, so, but guys, remember, be sure to like and subscribe and rate and review our podcast wherever you listen to it. Okay. So, babe, what are we talking about today? And why is our episode today kind of different than a lot of the other episodes
Let's
we
get
do?
into it.
Yeah.
Today we're talking about intimacy and specifically sexual intimacy. And so I would say this episode is probably like PG-13. So you may want to
Okay.
listen to this one without your kids, or at the very least, know that there's nothing inappropriate, but we may talk about some things that you are not quite ready to talk about with your kids, depending on what age they are. So keep that in mind as you listen.
Yeah. And I'm going to add to that if you have a particular sensitivity to talking about sex or sexuality because of wounds or whatever reason, that will be a part of this episode. We are talking about that. So I think it's okay for you to listen to, but we just wanted to be open about that from the beginning so you know. You know, we mentioned in our pilot episode that one of the reasons we're doing this, this whole thing, is that we want to be able to have open conversations about all aspects of marriage, right? And so this is the first episode. We're going to be talking about sexual intimacy, but it won't be the last. And let me say this, we're not experts at this. Okay. We want to start the conversation. In future episodes, we hope to bring in some experts to help us along the way. But right out of the gate, we want to say, let's talk about it.
Let's talk about it.
Yeah. So where do we start?
Okay. I like to say it like this. So a mommy bear and a daddy bear have a special wrestling time.
Okay.
And that's where baby bears come from. The end. Good episode, huh?
That was a great episode. Hey,
Thanks
guys.
for listening.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in.
Carolina.com.
Okay. No,
I like to
that's
have a
not
special
it.
wrestling time. That's a good one.
It's funny because I would have said a special cuddling time. So that highlights, you're like, wrestling time. And I'm like, cuddle time. Okay. But the goal of this episode, right, is to not solve all the complicated problems that we have around sex, all of us who are married, because they are there, and we have to just say that. Like, we had to put that out on the table, right?
You couldn't talk and fix enough to fix it in 1,000 episodes.
There are specific podcasts that all they talk about is that.
Yeah.
But by the end of this episode, we hope to have accomplished 3 things. So what are those 3 things?
Normalize talking about sex with your spouse.
Yeah.
That's the first thing we want to accomplish.
Right.
Number 2 is understanding your spouse's needs. And number 3, remind and encourage everybody that a healthy sex life is worth fighting for. And if you want to have healthier sex, you will have to fight for it. It will take some work. So that's what we're going to do in this episode.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, we're going to do it. We're going to do it. So.
Okay. We had just talked to one of our sons about sex. Like, this is not an episode about talking to your kids about sex, but just a sidebar. We talk to our kids about sex early and often.
Yeah.
So we had just talked to one of our sons about sex, and you and me and this particular son were the 3 of us in a car ride together the day after we had our first talk with him about sex and kind of explained, the mechanics. And we're driving in the car, and from the back seat, he says, "Hey, Dad, I got a question about the sex."
Which is adorable.
Yeah, he called it the sex.
Yeah, and we couldn't correct him. It was so cute.
He said, "I got a question about the sex." He said, "Can you do it in a car?" And I thought that was awesome. He's thinking about it. You know, he's in a back seat and he's wondering, I wonder if you can do it back here.
Right.
I told him you can. I said, so it's probably overrated.
Yeah.
But
True.
But you can.
Truth.
And
Truth.
that was just a good question that maybe nobody had ever asked before, or I'm sure people had thought about it, but he had the courage to bring it up.
And he just asked a normal question about something that he knows about, but he wasn't afraid to ask those questions. He didn't have inhibitions. And that's what we've got to start doing as couples. So first we've got to do this, and you mentioned this, we got to normalize conversations about sex, okay? And sex is something that all or most married couples do, right? We would say that. But for some reason, we're just not talking about it. It's like we think this is something that we can magically do on our own and understand each other on our own, not communicate about, and we'll get each other and we'll be able to connect. Now, we live in a culture that is hypersexualized. You see sex talked about and even displayed everywhere in our culture. So why do you think Christians are lagging behind in this area, babe?
I think we have not done a good job with what we're talking about. Yeah. It's just having conversation, because there are certain things that people associate sex and shame together. They get mingled up.
Yeah.
And most people that feel shame about their sexual desire, they keep it a secret.
Yeah.
They don't want to talk about it. But actually, it's a way to heal the soul. It's just to have conversation about that. Even if you have shameful desires, bringing it up, saying, confessing, hey, I need healing in this.
Right.
Howard Hendricks, who's a famous theologian and professor, has a great quote about sex. It says, "Don't be ashamed to talk about that which God was not ashamed to create."
I love that.
Normalizing conversations really is embracing the idea that sex is not something to be ashamed of. It's God's invention. He came up with it. It's not like sex is something that God knows we do, but he doesn't want to bring it up.
Yeah, right.
It's something that he meant for us to enjoy. It was his idea. It's his design. And so we will do ourselves a favor by inviting him in and bringing the conversation around to things we need to talk about, especially in light of how much we think about it or how much it impacts us, who we are.
Yeah, that's good. That's really good. So based on that, we need to start having or continue having conversations about things like our likes and dislikes or frequency, maybe hang-ups or past hurts, fears, like what are our fears associated around sex, our insecurities, and everything else about the topic. We've got to talk to each other about these things. And what if we thought about it this way? What if we were together in our minds and our hearts before we were together in our bodies?
That's a good one.
It might change things.
Is now a good time for me to bring up my dislikes and likes about?
Well, let's keep it PG-13, okay? All right. So now is a good time, though, for me to say, go back to the episode on communication, right? And we talked about in that episode, when you have conversations and you communicate, that you choose your time wisely and make sure that when you're having a sensitive conversation, you do it at a good time. So a good time might not be in the middle of sex. A good time might not be if you've had a stressful day at work and you're tired and you come home from work and it's dinner and the kids are going crazy. That might not be a good time to have that conversation. So choose a good time, speak honestly and openly, be careful with your words, and don't get defensive about the things that you hear from your spouse.
If you want to have better sex, maybe start communicating about sex.
Yeah.
Make sure you listen to the end of this episode because we're going to offer some example conversation starters that might be a helpful resource for you to just get the conversation going.
Yep.
Check those out. Stick around until the end.
Yeah. So we're going to normalize conversations about sex, right? And then secondly, we're going to understand our spouse's needs. Understand your spouse's needs. And I'm going to drop some scripture on you here.
Let's go.
Because I think it's a perfect place for this. Philippians 2:3-5 says, "Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, but in humility consider others better than yourselves. Each of you should look not only to your own interests, but also to the interest of others. Your attitude should be the same as that of Christ Jesus."
I don't know if a lot of people think about their sex life when they hear that verse,
Right.
but I think you've got something. I think you're onto something, and I draw out a little bit more of what you mean. How are you connecting those two? Make the link for me. What are you saying?
Right. So the world would teach you, our current culture would say that sex is about you, about filling your own needs, it feeling good for you. And when I say fulfilling your own needs, emotionally, physically, in whatever way, okay? Mentally, whatever, if it clears your mind, whatever. All of those things are about you. But the Bible is counterculture, and it teaches us that sex for me, sex for the married Christian, is about serving your spouse. That I'm not looking to my own needs. I'm first looking to your needs as my husband. You're first looking to my needs as your wife, and you're looking to serve me in that way, because in that way, I am more Christ-like. You are more Christ-like. And so it's a very different way of thinking about things, But I think it's the right way. I think it's the way God set up for us, and it works that way.
Okay. Normalizing conversation, understanding each other's needs, and finally, a healthy sex life is worth fighting for.
Right. Okay, I'm going to tell you a story, right? I'm starting with the story. So after our third son, Abe, was born, we were having what I would describe as a little bit of a lull in our sex life. And at that point, we had
What?
I know. We had 3 kids in a span of 3.5 years. Okay, so safe to say
There was sex involved, but it was...
we were exhausted, like in all the ways, okay? And the last thing I wanted anybody to do at the end of the day was to touch me, because I had kids hanging on me all day. Literally, I was nursing still. I had kids literally hanging on me all day. And so there was one morning I was just going through the house. The TV was on. There was a morning show that was on, and I was passively watching it. And I heard somebody say, "The 100-day dash transformed my marriage." And so I stopped and I was curious and I looked at it, and I realized as I listened more closely that they were talking about something called a 100-day dash, where they would have sex every day for 100 days. Okay. And if you're like me and you're listening, you're like, I'm out, hard stop. Okay. That's not going to happen. I balked at it. But then part of me got really excited about it. And I love a good challenge. And I thought, could we do this? And then I thought, how in the world could we do this? But do it. We did.
And I was 100% on board.
Yeah. You were. It wasn't hard
I was an easy
to
sell.
get you to say, yeah, let's do this.
I thought it was a great idea.
Yeah.
I was ready to make that investment in our
you were.
marriage.
So every day for 100 days straight. Now, to be clear, if sex is like food, all right, most of the time it was fast food, okay? We'd probably have a sit-down dinner weekly and occasionally a 5-course feast, okay? Y'all get me? Yeah. I'm using code here to talk about it. But the result was intimacy. And not the kind you're thinking of. We had meaningful and fun conversations every day for 100 days. And I connected to you on such a deep level.
Yeah. And while I was like way in, that was an easy sell.
Yeah.
It wasn't long before we were into it. And I realized, hey, this is an exercise in discipline.
Yeah. Yes.
Commitment, learning about each other,
Yep.
making time, not just to do it, but making time to connect relationally so that it made sense. We stopped trying to just get our own needs met.
Right.
And we learned a lot about just connecting with one another, And so the idea is that if you want a better outcome for your sex life, it's going to take work. You have to work at it, and you have to lay down your ego. It's not about me getting my needs met. It's about understanding you and helping you, and vice versa. And sex is about more than an orgasm. It's about, kind of the old phrase, business is presence. It's about just being with and learning and understanding and growing. But that's difficult to do if you don't ever do it.
Right.
And you don't make time for it.
Absolutely. And I want to say something to my lady friends out there, ladies. Don't fall back on those first 2 points on the conversations, on normalizing the conversation and then understanding your spouse's needs. Don't fall back on those 2 as a way of avoiding the act itself. Don't use sex as a weapon to get what you want. We can do that, and I've been guilty of doing that. It's very damaging. It erodes trust and it becomes transactional. And for you guys out there that may say, well, I don't even know when I'm talking about even expressing my needs to my spouse, I don't even know what that looks like. I don't even know what I need. That might be a sign that you could need some more help in this area. And so I want to recommend another podcast that's been so helpful for us and millions of others. It's called Java with Julie. Julie spelled Juli. And it's Dr. Julie Slattery. The link to her podcast and books is AuthenticIntimacy.com. So you can go to her website. And you cannot go wrong checking that out. She's an expert in this field, and we've read her books, we've heard her speak, and we look to her often for wisdom and insight. She's a Christian. She loves Jesus and has great
Dr.
advice.
Slattery is an amazing resource.
Yes.
Please, if you need to go deeper on this subject, which if you're only listening to this, you take it from me. You need to go
Yes.
deeper on it.
Absolutely.
But that is an amazing place to start. And she has a comprehensive set of resources for you to look at.
Yep.
And, you spoke to the ladies. I'd say this to the fellas, guys, don't make excuses by saying you're not very good at expressing yourself with words and yet still expect your wife to be emotionally engaged in sex without your emotional investment in her and you emotionally engaging in her. Touch her heart before you touch her body. You'd be surprised how different the sex is. And I think this is a paradox that we experience this paradox in our relationship.
Yep. For sure.
Guys are most eager to give their bodies sexually but withhold their emotions, and vice versa. Women are eager to be open emotionally, but can tend to withhold physically.
Yeah.
That's pretty typical. And what we find is that I need something from you that you don't naturally give, and you need something from me that I don't naturally give. But we gotta, like your Philippians scene, we gotta serve each other and agree that that's what's happening.
Right.
Talk about it.
Absolutely. So you mentioned questions earlier in the episode. How does this practically play out? Like, what can we do to normalize conversations, understand our spouse's needs, and fight for a healthy sex life?
We've come up with these questions. And so I'll just go through them.
Yeah.
Question number 1, how often do you want to do it?
That's a good question. That's a great question. And it really depends on season of life. Do you have small kids? Do you have stress at work? What's happening with your hormones? And so I would just say this, there's not a right answer. There is I need to know your answer and you need to know my answer. And oftentimes unmet expectations are unexpressed expectations. And so we just need to talk about it.
I'm going to write a number down and slide it across the table.
Oh, okay. See if our numbers match. They probably won't. Let me just say that.
Yeah.
They probably won't.
Yeah.
And that's where you meet in the middle.
Here's another question to ask. What are your likes and dislikes sexually?
Okay.
Frank question.
Yep.
These are good questions to ask outside of the context of having it. Talking about pick your best time.
Right.
Asking these questions in the moment, in the heat of the moment, not the right time.
Right, absolutely.
But have time, make time for this conversation. Now, what are your likes and dislikes? I would say this for women and men. Don't be brittle or easily offended when you ask this question, because you might get an answer that lets you know that what you thought was your signature move is actually something that your spouse is not so into.
Right. Not so signature.
So be open to remember that pride will make excuses, but humility will make adjustments. And if we're hurt in our pride that, we're not the lover we thought we were, that's okay. That might sting a little bit, but make the adjustment in humility to serve your spouse. Just be ready for what the answer is and don't get brittle or offended about it.
That's good. Okay, next. Do you have any fears and insecurities about sex? And that's a good question because we all come into our marriages with different ideas and maybe even some baggage, some abuse, some wounds around sex. And so what are your fears and insecurities? This would be a great time for me to mention that if you do have those and you've not worked through those, I would recommend a good, godly Christian counselor who can help you. We've experienced that in our marriage in this area in particular, and it's been super helpful, but it's really good to openly talk about those things together. And then next, what is something you need from me emotionally that would make me more interesting sexually? So I'm going to ask you that, babe. What is something that you need from me emotionally that would make me more interesting sexually?
You want me to answer it
answer it
in
like
real life?
If we were having this conversation,
What if I hurt your feelings?
what would that look like? I'm not going to be brittle.
It's on a podcast.
I know. It's okay.
I love it when you're into it.
Okay.
Like when you're invested in the physical part of it,
Right.
I like that.
Yeah.
That makes me more interested in you. That makes me want you more.
Yeah.
when you're into that aspect of it.
Right.
You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
that's one for me. And probably the opposite is true for you. Yeah. What's your
interesting.
answer?
So the opposite, I wouldn't necessarily say it's the opposite, but it is something that's different. It is that like when you are emotionally vulnerable with me, when you express to me those fears or insecurities or the deepest parts of your heart and who you are, that makes me attracted to you. That makes me emotionally connected with you and more open to giving myself to you. And so it is tricky because it's like what you said earlier, that you would easily offer your body and withhold your heart. I easily offer my heart and withhold my body. And that goes back to Philippians, do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. So that's how we serve each other. But that's a way that I would say I respond to you when you open up to me emotionally.
Okay, so one more question, maybe a conversation starter that we don't talk about often, but what are some things that kill your sex drive?
Yeah. Easy for me. Fatigue, hormones. If I feel unsupported, our kids, I love them, but man, they do. And then a schedule with no margin. That's for me. How about you?
I think for me, it's discouragement and even like disrespect.
When you say that, do you mean discouragement or disrespect from me or something else?
Like it can come from you. You're not too much on. I don't often feel like discouraged by you, but I know that a lot of guys like just being criticized at work or being discouraged, in some other venue of their life, even outside of the home. Now, even in a spousal relationship, I wouldn't be surprised if there was one spouse that was highly critical of the other, that the sex experience was pretty diminished.
Oh.
Yeah. So, but for me, it's, discouragement and disrespect, no matter where it comes from, that's something that's a drive killer for me.
Yeah.
Just if you don't feel like you're winning, in other aspects of your life, it's probably safer just to say, I don't want to feel like I've lost at it yet another thing.
Yeah.
So,
that makes sense for sure.
And fatigue, because, I'm getting older, and if I don't have my nap,
You got to have your nap.
yeah.
Papa needs his nap. Okay. I think part of what makes sex worth fighting for is the result of what happens when we lay down ourselves for each other. And that is, we look more like Jesus. And that is the intersection of our sex lives and the gospel.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
The gospel is comprehensive good news too.
Yeah.
So, Jesus' death and resurrection is the redemption of every single molecule in the universe. He died to redeem all of it.
Yeah.
So even something that can feel so broken as sex and sexuality and, even that space between married people, something that can feel so broken as that, Jesus can heal and redeem it when we bring it to him.
Yep.
And that's really the hope that we have in all this.
Yeah.
That the gospel would shine so brightly, even in something that's so intimate. I think when we bring these things to Christ, that's when transformation and healing and new life begins to bloom.
Yes.
No matter what dimension of your life it is, especially here in intimacy.
Yep. That's
So
great.
we know this is difficult. We know this is stuff's not easy to talk about. And this is just beginning the conversation. But we also want to make sure that people that are listening, that we're praying for you. And Heather and I are setting aside 7 a.m. every Monday morning to pray for marriages. We're joining together. We ask you to join us at the same time, 7 a.m. Monday mornings, to pray for marriages. Will you please share with us on our email how we can pray for your marriage? What do you need? hi@carlandheather.com. hi@carlandheather.com. That's the place where you send your prayer requests. Please let us know. It will be anonymous. We'll protect your identity. We're not going to say your name on the air. We will call out your needs in prayer Mondays at 7 a.m.
Yeah. I'm going to highlight just a couple places that we're going to be at over the next few weeks. As this podcast airs, I'm going to be in South Sudan, so November 7th through the 17th. So if you would think about it, stop and pray for me and our team in South Sudan, November 15th through the 17th. Babe, you're going to be at Beulah Baptist speaking, leading worship at a marriage conference. That's in North Carolina.
Yep.
November 22nd through the 24th, we're going to be at a Weekend to Remember, which is a marriage retreat. They offer them all over the country. Go to familylife.com to find out more information. And if you want to go to one, you can use the code TEAMCART to get $100 off your registration.
It's an incredible deal.
It's awesome. We'll be in Williamsburg, Virginia, November 22nd through the 24th. November 28th is Thanksgiving Miracle Breakfast. You are invited, but you have to message us to have breakfast at our house, and we'll send you our address. And then December 8th is Worship House at our house. Again, message us for the address, where we gather together with friends and neighbors in our community to worship once a month. February 8th is the Behold Women's Gathering here in Franklin, Tennessee. Go to beholdgathering.com to find out more information. And then we have other events, places where we're going to be in 2025 in the spring on our website. So go to carlandheather.com to check that out. Yeah.
Don't forget about the Behold Women's Bible Study. It's a Bible study that Heather has written, Beholding Jesus, Becoming Whole, available on Amazon. And just let me say, 'tis the season, a great Christmas gift for your wife, for your mom, or your daughter, or your daughter-in-law, or your granddaughter. Check it out.
All the things.
Behold Women's Bible Study.
Thanks, babe. Hey, we love to bring live events to couples in a group setting. So if you're interested in having us come to your church or marriage event, reach out to us on social media or at carlandheather.com.
Remember, the Bible says that the enemy of our souls comes to steal, kill, and destroy. But Jesus has come that we might have life and have it to the full. And that includes our sex life.
Yep.
So fight for the gift that he died to give you.
Yep. Hey, thanks for listening.
Let's go. Together on purpose.
It's Carl and